As much as David tried to do for Saul, the hatred and the jealousy increased. And David had faced trial after trial after trial. He had to face the giant Goliath. Saul said, well, if you put on my armor, you'll be able to face him better. Not at all. David went with God's blessing. The battle is the Lord's, not yours, Saul. All kinds of trials. He's running for his life. Saul's men would kill him at the only opportunity. Oh, listen. Wouldn't that make you feel good? Here you are. You've helped Saul. You played music. You calmed his nerves when he was upset. You're the rising king to the throne. And now, wonderful. How would that make you feel emotionally? Well, I know what to do. I wouldn't see you in prayer meeting for about a month. You'd be so upset. Thank God you have visitation. I wouldn't see you in visitation for 2 months. Yes, how does it make you feel emotionally? You're all wrought up. You're all discouraged. The circumstance of life press in. You've got the pink slip down at work. You've got to call somebody seriously ill in your family. Circumstance of life, you get emotional, and that's what happened to David. And you know what? David neglected the very source of strength that should be his. If you read, I'm not going to read it all, but if you go back to chapter 26, I won't turn there this morning. I'll let you do it for homework, but that's the last time David said, I'd better have something to do with God. I'd better pray and ask God for his help. I'd better communicate with him. So David forgot about that, and time had passed as the things of life begin to pass, and here he is. Now, that's a circumstance of life that come to pass. Got that? First lesson. Pass the test. Let's go to the second lesson, right? How did the characters in the story react to distress? Let's look at them for a few moments. David had 600 men. Now, they weren't the men that you would automatically choose to follow you. They were men that were in debt. They were in distress. They were men with problems, but David said 600 of them, you can come. You'll be a part of my group. And so they did. Now, let's find out about them. Reading down through chapter 30 here, we'll look at it. And it came to pass, when David and his men were come to Ziklag on the 3rd day, David had gone with the Philistines. The Philistine leader said, what are these Hebrews doing here? We don't trust them. You send them back to where they belong. And so Agag said, all right, we will send you back to where you belong. We have given you the city of Ziklag, and you stay there. So 600 men now turn their back, leave the Philistines, and 3 days they head for home. Now, you that have been in the military, you know how you feel going home? I mean, it's one of the most wonderful days in all of your life. You're going home. I mean, you've been eating that military food for a long time, as nourishing as it may be. It's not home cooking. I mean, that bed they give you may be a place to rest, but it's not your bed. And sometimes the folks that are surrounding you, you have no choice in who they are. It's not like going home to friends and family, is it? So they have 3 days to think about this, and I can see them saying, you know, it's going to be wonderful to be home. Just think of it. Being home, there's my wife and my kids. I don't know how long they've been missing, how long they've been gone, but they've been a part of this group that David had about him. And now they're going home to Ziklag, their city, their town. Notice what happened. Chapter 30, verse 1. They come to Ziklag on the 3rd day, that the Amalekites had invaded the south, and Ziklag, and smitten Ziklag, and burned it with fire. and had taken the women captives that were therein. They slew not any, neither great nor small, but carried them away and went on their way. So David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burned with fire. Their wives, their sons, their daughters were taken captives. And David and the people, notice this, were with him, filled up their voices and wept until they had no more power to weep. What happened to his followers? They were distraught. They had every right to be distraught. They went home. Their wives, their children were gone. Their homes were gone. Their city was burned. An enemy had come while they were in absence and had destroyed everything. They hadn't killed them, but they'd taken these people captive, and now they are distraught. Their hearts are broken. Circumstances had come to pass. They had no control over them. And they were so devastated emotionally. Notice down in verse number 6, and David was greatly distressed. Greatly distressed. And we read on, for the people spake of stoning him. Now they came back, and the stress, they grieved. We ought to grieve. Like most of us, we've lost close friends or we've lost close relatives. And in spite of the fact that we do the very best that we can to have some kind of a memorial to that person, maybe a church service, maybe a wonderful preaching service, some kind of a wonderful memorial, yet there's still a time of grieving, isn't there? And it goes on. It goes on. I'm a little different than many because when I was a 9-year-old boy, I woke up one Sunday morning. My grandmother came and said, your mother died. Your mother's no longer here. And so I didn't understand all that was going on, but I can remember a few things. We got together with the family and we had to plan out these things, and pretty soon we took a little casket out into a cemetery and we laid that casket in the cemetery and we went home. My sister, 2 years younger, I was 9, she was 7. Mom was no longer there. To wake up in the morning, get ready for school, Mom wasn't there. And there was a time of grieving, but listen, that time of grieving comes to an end. It comes to an end. And what happens if it doesn't come to an end? Well, we see it there in verse 6. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spake of stoning him, because the soul of the people was grieved, every man for his sons, his daughters, in great distress. You notice what happened? Well, emotionally they were devastated. We can understand that. But even beyond that, you know what happens when you get emotionally devastated? Then your judgment begins to fail. And so these folks said, all right, the answer to our problem is to get rid of David. That's not too bright. That's not being in control of the situation. Why get rid of David? David's a leader. David's your general. No, they said, if we can kill David, our problems are solved. Yeah, when stress hits you, it's kind of hard to think, isn't it? And many times the decisions that you make are not based on biblical principles, but they're made by how you happen to feel at that moment. And that's the way with that crowd. They became very, very bitter in their spirit. And that's one of the dangers you are going to have to face, and I have to face it all the time. Because things come to pass, and they have a tendency to make us feel very bitter. We've been wronged. Let me show you what happens. Just turn to Hebrews quickly. We're not going to stay here. Just quickly, just turn there. I want to see this. Stress comes. And this is what happens, biblically. Go to chapter 12. You know the verse probably. I'll just read it for you. Chapter 12. And we're going to skip down to verse 15. Looking diligently,